The sharp, metallic shriek of diving jet engines filled the air, a sound that promised decisive victory for the Soviet pilots. It is 1951 and the skies over Korea, known grimly as MiG Alley, are the deadliest hunting ground on Earth. The MiG-15, with its superior climb rate, its higher service ceiling, and the fearsome punch of its 37mm cannon, was widely believed to be the king of this new aerial domain. Its opponent, the American F-86 Sabre, was acknowledged to possess a weaker engine, a lower ceiling, and a less potent armament. By all accounts, physics, and the cold logic of aerial combat, this engagement should have been a swift, predictable Soviet triumph. The pressure of the moment was immense. The air was thin, the speeds incredible, and the stakes were life and death. Sutyagin, a seasoned pilot, led his squadron in a textbook Soviet dive attack, a maneuver honed through countless hours of training. They closed on the unsuspecting Sabres, their sights aligning, the cannon primed to unleash devastation. The world narrowed to a flickering crosshair, the roar of the engines a deafening pulse against the silence of anticipation. This was the moment they had trained for, the moment where Soviet air superiority would be proven on the battlefield. The skies belonged to them, or so the calculations, the designs, and the operational parameters all dictated. Yet, as the 37mm rounds streaked through the sky, they missed their mark, and the MiGs, instead of being vulnerable after their attack pass, executed a seemingly impossible zoom climb. According to all known principles of aerodynamics and jet propulsion, they should have outclimbed and outrun any F-86. But then the impossible happened. A lone Sabre, defying the fundamental laws of physics, was observed to be following the MiGs upward, a shadow attached to their escape. This was not a chase, it was an aerial impossibility, a violation of the very rules of flight. A burst of fire erupted from the Sabre, not at close range, but from a distance that should have rendered such accuracy futile. The rounds struck the wingman's aircraft with unnerving precision, tearing into its wing. Panic, cold and absolute, began to grip the Soviet pilots. Their carefully constructed reality shattered. The chilling, disbelieving whisper went through the formation. The Americans' bullets, they guide themselves. And this was not merely a defeat, it was an encounter with something utterly unknown, a terrifying glimpse of an advantage that defied comprehension, planting the first seeds of fear and doubt in the heart of MiG Alley. The disbelief among the Soviet pilots was palpable, a heavy cloak settling over their formations. For weeks they had flown the MiG-15 with an unwavering confidence, a certainty born from its superior performance metrics. It could outclimb, out-accelerate, and outgun the F-86 Sabre in almost every conceivable scenario. The very air seemed to conspire in their favor. Their initial dives, while resulting in missed shots due to the sheer velocity of the engagement, were meant to be followed by a swift, unassailable climb away from any potential threat. This was not just theory, it was the established order of aerial combat in Korea. The concept of an enemy aircraft matching their climb rate, let alone outmaneuvering them in such a fashion, was an affront to their training and their understanding of jet warfare. The visual confirmation of the Sabre clinging to their tail during their zoom climb sent a jolt of cognitive dissonance through the seasoned veterans. It was as if the laws of physics had been suspended, leaving them adrift in a reality where their most trusted assumptions no longer held true. The accuracy of the subsequent attack was equally baffling. The distance from which the F-86 had fired was significant, a range where hitting a fast-moving, climbing target would require an extraordinary degree of luck or an entirely unknown capability. The impact on the wingman's aircraft was not a scatter of random hits, but a tightly grouped series of strikes that spoke of deliberate, almost surgical intent. This level of precision at such a range against an aircraft executing a high-G maneuver was simply not possible with the existing technology that Soviet pilots understood. Their own 37mm cannon, while powerful, was known for its substantial recoil and relatively slow muzzle velocity, making it a formidable weapon at closer ranges but difficult to employ with pinpoint accuracy against agile opponents. The Sabre's armament, typically the 50 caliber M3 Browning machine guns, were considered less potent, and achieving such a devastating result from afar seemed an insurmountable challenge. The immediate aftermath of these encounters was a growing disorientation among the pilots. Reports filtered back to squadron commanders, not as tales of skillful enemy piloting, but as accounts of inexplicable phenomena. Pilots, their faces pale and drawn, described a sense of helplessness, of being outmatched not by superior skill but by something entirely alien. The fear was not just of being shot down, but of the unknown nature of the threat. It fostered a creeping paranoia, a sense that their aircraft, their training, and their understanding of aerial warfare were fundamentally inadequate. This was the genesis of a deeply unsettling realization that the enemy possessed an advantage, unseen and poorly understood, that was turning the tide of battles where they should have been dominant. This initial encounter in the skies above Korea was not just a tactical skirmish, it was a profound challenge to the established military scientific understanding of the era, hinting at a technological leap that would force a desperate re-evaluation of Soviet capabilities. As the weeks unfolded, the unsettling encounters in the sky began to cast a long, dark shadow over the air bases on the ground. The pilots, returning from their sorties, were no longer the confident, boisterous men who had arrived in Korea. They landed their advanced MiG-15s with a quiet, practiced precision, but the bravado was gone. Climbing out of their cockpits, they were pale, their faces etched with a mixture of exhaustion and a deep, gnawing fear. Their eyes held a distant, haunted look, as if they had witnessed something that fundamentally broke their understanding of the world. They would gather in small, hushed groups, speaking in low tones, their gestures animated by a nervous energy that belied their attempts at composure. The raw, visceral terror of being hunted by an invisible force was a stark contrast to the revolutionary zeal and technical pride they were expected to embody. The reports coming in from different squadrons were disturbingly consistent. It wasn't just one pilot or a single flight that had experienced the phenomenon, it was becoming a widespread pattern. From various sectors of MiG Alley, pilots described the same impossible physics, Sabres that could climb with them, that could hold a firing solution from extreme distances, and that could deliver rounds with an accuracy that was nothing short of supernatural. Commanders, initially dismissive, found themselves faced with a growing pile of after-action reports that read more like science fiction than military debriefings. The accounts were too similar, the details too specific, to be chalked up to individual panic or combat stress. A collective psychological collapse was taking root, a shared trauma that spread through the squadrons like a contagion. The physical evidence was even more unnerving. Maintenance crews and armorers examining the damaged MiGs that managed to limp back to base made a chilling discovery. The bullet holes were not scattered across the fuselage in the typical pattern of a machine gun burst. Instead, they were clustered in tight, precise groupings, sometimes no larger than a dinner plate. It was the work of a sniper, not a fighter jet. This sniper-quality precision, delivered from a moving platform hundreds of yards away against another aircraft traveling at over 500 miles per hour, was the detail that defied all logic. Soviet ballistic experts were summoned, men who understood the complex science of aerial gunnery better than anyone. They examined the entry points, the angles of impact, and the damage patterns. Their conclusions were stark and unsettling. the hits were too consistent to be luck. This growing body of evidence created a dangerous rift between the pilots and the political officers, the commissars assigned to each unit to ensure ideological purity and morale. To the commissars, steeped in a worldview that prized human will and socialist superiority, these tales of American superweapons sounded like excuses. They saw not a technical problem, but a moral failing. Accusations of cowardice began to circulate. Pilots were pulled into tense, accusatory debriefings, their professionalism and courage questioned. They were accused of fabricating stories to cover for their own incompetence or, worse, of succumbing to capitalist propaganda. The political officers insisted that the American F-86 was an inferior machine, and any failure to defeat it was a failure of the pilot's spirit, not a failure of his aircraft. This created an atmosphere of deep mistrust, forcing pilots to censor their own reports for fear of reprisal, further isolating them with a terror they could not openly discuss. Commanders were caught in the middle, torn between the undeniable evidence on their damaged aircraft and the rigid dogma of their political overseers. They couldn't understand how the Americans were achieving such results. The F-86 Sabre was armed with 6 M3 Browning .50 caliber machine guns, a design that was fundamentally an evolution of a World War II weapon. It was a reliable, rapid-fire gun, but it was not known for long-range precision. Soviet intelligence had confirmed the specifications. There were no reports of proximity-fused shells or guided projectiles. The mystery deepened, feeding the paranoia that was now rampant. Unable to speak freely with their superiors, the pilots developed their own lexicon to describe the phenomenon. They began to talk about a specific area around the American Sabres, an invisible bubble of lethality. In hushed conversations, away from the watchful ears of the commissars, they gave it a name: the zone. It was a simple, chilling term for a complex terror. The zone was the radius around an F-86, where the laws of physics seemed to bend in the Americans' favor. To enter it was to subject oneself to an almost certain, inexplicable death. A grim new mantra began to spread through the barracks and ready rooms, a piece of whispered folklore born from hard experience. Enter the zone and you die. This wasn't a tactical assessment. It was a surrender to a mystery they could not solve, a psychological line drawn in the sky that marked the boundary between a fair fight and a brush with the impossible. As the whispers of the zone solidified into a pervasive, morale-crushing dread, the reports from MiG Alley traveled up the chain of command, finally landing on desks in Moscow. The anecdotal evidence from terrified pilots and the chilling analyses of ballistic experts painted a picture of a technological gap so profound it could not be ignored. The Kremlin, faced with a threat that defied conventional explanation, responded with a directive of stark simplicity and immense gravity. The order was issued through secure channels, cutting through layers of bureaucracy with the cold weight of absolute authority. Bring us a Sabre at any cost. It was a command that transformed the nature of the conflict on the ground, initiating a new, secret war fought not for territory, but for a single piece of technology. In response, a new type of unit was formed. Elite engineers from the GRU, the Soviet military's main intelligence directorate, were dispatched to the front lines. These were not soldiers in the traditional sense. They were men of science, experts in reverse engineering and technical analysis. They were paired with special units of the Chinese People's Volunteer Army, forming dedicated retrieval teams. Their mission was singular: to recover a downed F-86 Sabre, preferably intact. These teams were equipped with heavy lifting gear, cutting torches, and transport vehicles, ready to deploy at a moment's notice whenever a Sabre was reported down near friendly territory. A desperate, high-stakes race against time had begun. The Americans, however, were acutely aware of the intelligence value of their aircraft. They understood that something aboard the Sabre was giving their pilots a decisive edge, and they were determined to protect that secret. A strict scorched earth policy was implemented. Whenever an F-86 was forced down, the pilot's first priority, if able, was to destroy the aircraft's sensitive equipment. If the pilot was incapacitated or captured, rescue teams were dispatched not only to retrieve the airman, but also to ensure the wreck was obliterated. If a ground recovery was not possible, flights of fighter bombers were sent to strafe and bomb the downed plane until it was nothing more than a heap of molten metal. The secret of the Sabre was to be guarded as fiercely as any military fortress. This led to a series of frustratingly close calls for the Soviet-Chinese recovery units. Several times they were alerted to a crash site, only to arrive minutes too late. They would find the smoldering, blackened remnants of a Sabre, its cockpit a gutted ruin, its secrets vaporized by American ordnance. The air would still hang thick with the acrid smell of burnt fuel and electronics, a taunting reminder of their failure. In one instance, a team raced toward a plume of smoke on a distant hillside, their trucks bouncing over the rugged terrain, only to see a flight of American Sky Raiders banking away, having just delivered their destructive payload. The wreckage was so thoroughly demolished that it offered no clues, just twisted fragments of aluminum and steel. The hunt became a tense cat-and-mouse game, played out in the mud and dust of the Korean peninsula, with the prize being nothing less than the future of aerial warfare. Then the breakthrough came. An American pilot, nursing his damaged F-86 after a chaotic dogfight, managed to guide his aircraft over the coastline. Losing altitude and engine power, he had no choice but to attempt a belly landing. He brought the plane down not on hard ground, but on a vast, forgiving expanse of tidal mudflats near the coast. The soft, yielding mud cushioned the impact, and the Sabre slid to a halt, miraculously intact. The pilot was quickly rescued by a helicopter, but the aircraft itself was stuck, half swallowed by the thick, grey ooze. It was too soft for American recovery vehicles to reach, yet too exposed to be easily destroyed from the air without risking collateral damage to nearby civilian areas. For the Soviet recovery teams, it was the opportunity they had been waiting for. The operation had to be conducted with surgical precision and under the absolute cover of darkness. As night fell, hundreds of local laborers were conscripted, joining the specialized Soviet-Chinese unit. Working by the dim, shielded light of lanterns, they used wooden planks to create a makeshift road across the treacherous mud. Heavy ropes and chains were attached to the Sabre's landing gear struts. What followed was a Herculean effort of human will against nature. Men strained against the ropes, their feet sinking into the cold, wet silt, their muscles burning with exertion. Slowly, painstakingly, they began to drag the 10,000-pound jet from the mud's powerful suction. It was a primal, almost silent struggle, the only sounds the creak of ropes, the squelch of mud, and the grunted commands of the team leaders. Inch by agonizing inch, they pulled the American ghost from its grave. Once it was on solid ground, it was carefully camouflaged and transported across the Yalu River into the safety of Chinese territory, and from there it began its long, secret journey by rail to a specialized laboratory in Moscow. The hunt was over. The ghost had been caught, and its secrets were about to be laid bare. Meanwhile, far from the chaotic front lines of Korea, the captured F-86 Sabre rested under the harsh, sterile lights of a high-security laboratory in Moscow. The atmosphere was one of intense, almost reverent anticipation. Here, a hand-picked team of the Soviet Union's finest aeronautical engineers and weapons specialists had assembled. They approached the American aircraft not just as a piece of enemy hardware, but as an enigma, the physical embodiment of a mystery that had haunted their pilots for months. They were prepared to uncover a revolutionary weapon, a piece of technology so advanced it could explain the Sabre's seemingly supernatural abilities. The order from the Kremlin had been clear: dissect it, understand it, and replicate its secrets. The first components to be carefully removed were the 6 Browning M3 machine guns. The engineers handled them with a mixture of professional curiosity and tactical respect. These were the weapons that had inflicted such precise, sniper-like damage on their MiGs. Yet, as they were laid out on the sterile examination tables, a profound sense of anticlimax began to fill the room. The guns were ordinary. They were well manufactured, certainly, but they were fundamentally a simple mechanical design. There were no complex firing mechanisms, no recoil dampening systems of exotic origin. They were, in essence, a slightly faster firing version of a weapon that had been in service for decades. The engineers exchanged puzzled glances. This was crude, old-world technology. Their investigation then turned to the ammunition. Crates of .50 caliber rounds recovered from the Sabre's ammo bays were painstakingly disassembled. The team was looking for any anomaly: a tiny guidance fin, a proximity fuse, a special chemical propellant that could grant the projectile an unnaturally flat trajectory. They found nothing. The bullets were a standard mix of ball, tracer, and incendiary rounds, identical in principle to the ammunition used in World War II. There was no secret source, no guided magic bullet that the panicked pilots had described. The mystery of the self-guiding shots was deepening, not resolving. The physical evidence before them directly contradicted the harrowing reports from the front. Frustration began to mount. The engineers moved on to the airframe itself, searching for exotic alloys or structural innovations that might explain the Sabre's ability to defy physics and follow the MiGs in a zoom climb. They took metallurgical samples, analyzed the composition of the aluminum skin, and studied the jet's internal structure. Again, the findings were disappointing. The F-86 was a superbly designed aircraft, a masterpiece of aerodynamic engineering, but it contained no materials or construction techniques that were beyond the theoretical understanding of Soviet science. Its engine, while reliable, confirmed their intelligence reports. It was less powerful than the Klimov VK-1 that powered the MiG-15. The atmosphere in the laboratory grew thick with confusion and a palpable sense of letdown. The leading scientists conferred in hushed, urgent tones. "How are they achieving sniper accuracy with this?" one was heard to murmur, gesturing with exasperation at the primitive Browning guns. "It makes no sense." The narrative from the front line was one of almost magical American superiority, yet the machine itself was proving to be stubbornly, disappointingly conventional. The pressure from the high command was immense, and they had, so far, found nothing to justify the enormous effort and risk involved in the aircraft's capture. They were faced with a paradox. A technologically inferior machine was achieving demonstrably superior results. It was in this moment of collective frustration that their attention finally turned away from the weapons and the airframe and toward the cockpit. This was the pilot's domain, the human-machine interface. As they began to carefully dismantle the instrument panel, their focus was drawn to a single, unassuming piece of equipment positioned directly in the pilot's line of sight. It was a gun sight, but unlike any they had ever seen. It was a compact, heavy black box, far more complex than the simple optical sights used in their own MiGs. Their ASP-1N sight was little more than a projected reticle on a piece of glass, a system that required the pilot to estimate range, speed, and deflection entirely by instinct and experience. This American device was something else entirely. It was covered in complex wiring and connected to various systems throughout the aircraft. The engineers, their curiosity piqued, began to carefully remove its housing, unaware that they were about to find the real ghost in the machine. The answer to the mystery was not in the guns that fired the bullets, but in the strange, dense black box that told the pilot where to aim. As the engineers in the Moscow laboratory carefully pried open the housing of the mysterious black box, the source of their frustration, a collective, hushed reverence, fell over the room. What they saw inside was not the simple collection of lenses and mirrors they were accustomed to. Instead, they were confronted with a miniature city of unimaginable complexity. It was a dense, three-dimensional tapestry of ultra-fine wiring with connections so delicate they seemed to have been spun by a spider. Gears and servos of jewel-like precision were nestled against gyroscopes floating in crystal-clear housings. It was immediately, shockingly apparent that this was not a simple optical instrument. This was a machine that could think. This was the A4 ranging and computing gun sight. At its heart lay the secret to its genius. A set of floating, integrating gyros, each one a marvel of mechanical engineering. These were not the crude, caged gyros the Soviets were familiar with. Each gyro was a perfectly balanced wheel, suspended in a special damping fluid within a sealed canister, allowing it to move and precess with near-perfect freedom. This design allowed the system to sense the slightest change in the aircraft's motion. It measured the g-forces of a turn, the rate of roll, the pitch and yaw of the Sabre as it maneuvered through the sky. It was, in essence, a mechanical brain that felt every movement the pilot made, but this was only one half of the equation. The engineers traced a set of wires leading from the gun sight forward into the nose of the Sabre. There they found another piece of technology that was equally astonishing, a tiny radar antenna, part of a system known as the APG-30. This compact radar unit served a single, revolutionary purpose. It continuously sent out a narrow beam of radio waves that would bounce off the target aircraft and return, providing the gun sight with a constant, real-time measurement of the distance to the enemy MiG. This was the ranging component, an automatic flow of data that eliminated the most difficult piece of guesswork for a pilot in a dogfight. Here, then, was the devastatingly effective secret. The A4 gun sight was an analog computer. It took two constantly changing streams of information, the motion of the Sabre from its gyros and the precise distance to the target from its radar, and performed a continuous, instantaneous calculation. It solved the complex three-dimensional trigonometry problem of aerial gunnery, a problem that even the most experienced pilot could only ever approximate through instinct and training. The gyros told the computer how the Sabre was moving, and the radar told it where the target was. The computer then calculated exactly where the target would be in the split second it took for the bullets to travel from the Sabre's guns. The result of this calculation was then fed to a set of miniature servo motors. These motors physically moved the gun sight's reticle, the glowing, aiming pipper that the pilot saw projected on his windscreen. The reticle did not stay fixed in the center. Instead, it moved automatically, showing the pilot the correct aim-ahead point, or lead angle. To the American pilot, the process was one of beautiful, lethal simplicity. He didn't need to calculate deflection, estimate range, or guess the enemy's G-load. His only job was to maneuver his aircraft until the moving pipper was sitting directly on the enemy MiG, and then pull the trigger. The gun sight handled the rest. Just put the pipper on the target and shoot. For the Soviet engineers, this revelation was a moment of both profound admiration and deep dread. They compared this system to their own ASP-1N optical sight, and the technological chasm was almost too vast to comprehend. The ASP-1N was a static system. It simply projected a fixed crosshair onto glass. It was up to the Soviet pilot to perform all the complex mental calculations to guess the range, to estimate the deflection, and to fire based on a highly refined instinct. The American system removed the guesswork. It transformed aerial gunnery from an art into a science, executed with the cold, infallible precision of a machine. The manufacturing quality of the A4 was what truly drove the point home. The tolerances were measured in microns, the wiring was perfectly insulated, the gears were flawless, and the gyros were balanced to a degree that Soviet industry at the time simply could not achieve. It was a victory of precision. The Americans had created a weapon that was not more powerful in the traditional sense, but infinitely smarter. It was a paradigm shift that redefined the very nature of air combat. The ghost shots, the impossible accuracy, the panic in MiG Alley, it all came down to this small, dense black box. It became clear in that Moscow laboratory that America had won this crucial early battle of the Cold War, not with megatons of force, but with the almost invisible, microscopic perfection of its engineering. The discovery of the A4 gun sight sent shockwaves through the highest levels of the Soviet military and political establishment. The sense of technological dread was quickly replaced by a furious, determined urgency. Joseph Stalin, upon being briefed on the device's capabilities, issued a decree that was characteristic of his leadership style: direct, uncompromising, and absolute. The A4 was to be copied, not improved upon, not adapted, but replicated exactly. The order was screw for screw, wire for wire. It was a command born from a deep-seated belief that any technological marvel could be reverse-engineered and mass-produced through the sheer force of socialist will and industrial might. The project was given the highest priority, and a new gun sight, designated the ASP-4, was slated for production. However, the directive, while simple in its wording, represented a profound misunderstanding of what made the American device so effective. The genius of the A4 was not merely in its design, but in the vast and sophisticated industrial ecosystem that had produced it. Soviet factories, for all their ability to churn out rugged tanks and powerful cannons by the thousands, were ill-equipped for this new era of micro-precision. They lacked the climate-controlled clean rooms necessary to assemble delicate gyroscopic instruments without contamination from dust or humidity. They did not possess the advanced machine tools capable of milling gears to the microscopic tolerances required for the A4's internal mechanisms. The very metallurgy was a challenge. The stable, temperature-resistant alloys used in the American device were beyond the immediate capabilities of Soviet production. Despite these systemic limitations, the engineers and workers pressed on, driven by the unwavering pressure from above. They produced a clone that, on the surface, looked identical to the American original. But the flaws were internal, invisible, and catastrophically significant. The gyros, the very heart of the system, were never perfectly balanced. Microscopic imperfections in the ball bearings or slight impurities in the metal caused them to wobble and drift. The special damping fluid that suspended the gyros in the A4 was a complex chemical compound that Soviet science struggled to replicate perfectly. Their version was often impure, its viscosity changing with temperature, causing the gyros to lag or overshoot. The wiring, copied meticulously by hand, was often subject to sloppy soldering and inadequate insulation, leading to intermittent short circuits and signal noise. When the first ASP-4 units were installed in MiG-15s and tested, the results were an unmitigated disaster. Pilots who had been eagerly awaiting this new magic box found themselves wrestling with a system that was not just ineffective, but actively hostile. The aiming reticle, which was supposed to glide smoothly to the correct lead angle, would instead jitter erratically across the windscreen. Sometimes it would lag far behind the target, causing pilots to miss by a wide margin. Other times it would suddenly jump to an absurd, impossible aim point, as if possessed by a ghost. In a high G turn, when the system's accuracy was most critical, the unbalanced gyros would tumble, sending the reticle into a wild, unpredictable spin. The complaints from the frontline squadrons were bitter and laced with gallows humor. "The box is trying to kill us," one pilot famously reported. Instead of reducing the pilot's workload, the ASP-4 added a terrifying new layer of unpredictability to the already stressful environment of a dogfight. Pilots found they couldn't trust the information it was giving them. They were forced to try and mentally override the faulty computer, fighting not only the enemy Sabre, but also their own malfunctioning equipment. The project that was meant to close the technological gap had instead become a liability, a dangerous distraction that eroded pilot confidence and wasted precious seconds in the heat of combat. Eventually, the pilots took matters into their own hands. In an act of quiet, pragmatic rebellion, they began to systematically disable the system. Mechanics were instructed to disconnect the power to the ASP-4's computer, effectively turning the advanced analog computer back into a simple, fixed gun sight, no different from the old ASP-1N they had used before. They reverted to the old ways, relying once again on skill, instinct, and the time-honored art of Kentucky windage. The ambitious top-down effort to replicate American precision had failed completely, undone by the systemic weaknesses of the Soviet planned economy. It was a brutal lesson. You could not simply copy a piece of advanced technology. You had to build the entire scientific and industrial culture capable of conceiving and perfecting it. The result in the skies over Korea was decisive. With their technological equalizer proving to be a dud, the MiG-15 pilots lost their last best hope of challenging the Sabres on equal terms. The F-86, guided by their perfectly calibrated mechanical brains, came to dominate the conflict, cementing the legend of MiG Alley as their hunting ground. As the last shots of the Korean War faded, the lessons learned in the skies over MiG Alley began to shape the future of the Cold War in ways that were both profound and enduring. The contest between the MiG-15 and the F-86 Sabre had been decided not by the traditional metrics of air power, not by the roar of a more powerful engine, the reach of a higher service ceiling, or the punch of a heavier cannon. The Sabre had emerged victorious because it could think. It had defeated the MiG, not with brute force, but with computation. This realization sent a quiet seismic shock through the foundations of Soviet military doctrine. It was a clear and humbling demonstration that they had fallen dangerously behind in the nascent fields of electronics, data processing, and, most critically, precision manufacturing. For the leadership in the Kremlin, the failure of the ASP-4 Newton program was more than just a tactical setback. It was a strategic crisis. It revealed a fundamental weakness in their industrial base that could not be solved by sheer manpower or revolutionary zeal. The ability to manufacture components with microscopic tolerances, to create perfectly balanced gyroscopes, and to produce stable, complex electronics was not an isolated skill. It was the product of a deep, mature technological ecosystem that they simply did not possess. In the wake of this failure, Soviet designers made a pragmatic, if ultimately fateful, decision. Realizing they could not compete in the realm of sophisticated avionics, they pivoted their focus back to what they did best: raw power and performance. The next generation of Soviet fighters, like the MiG-19 and the MiG-21, were designed to be faster, to climb higher, and to fly with breathtaking speed. They would attempt to win future battles by being so fast that no gun sight, however smart, could catch them. The Americans, meanwhile, drew the opposite conclusion. The success of the A4 gun sight validated their burgeoning obsession with electronics and information. They had seen firsthand that a smarter weapon, even on a platform that was not superior in every respect, could dominate the battlefield. They immediately began to double down on this advantage. The A4 was not an end point. It was the beginning of a technological trajectory that would define Western air power for the rest of the century. Its core principles, using sensors to gather data, a computer to process it, and a display to give the pilot a simple solution, became the foundational logic for all future fire control systems. The analog computer of the A4 gave way to digital processors. The tiny radar grew into powerful, long-range systems, and the simple glowing pipper evolved into the sophisticated heads-up displays or HUDs that are standard in all modern fighter aircraft. The ghost of the A4 lives on in the F-35's helmet-mounted display, where a pilot can simply look at a target to lock on, the ultimate expression of the principle. Just put the pipper on the target and shoot. This divergence in military philosophy, born from the experience in MiG Alley, set the two superpowers on starkly different paths. The Soviets pursued a doctrine of speed and maneuverability, relying on ground-controlled interception to guide their powerful jets into firing position. The Americans pursued a doctrine of information dominance, pouring vast resources into creating aircraft that were not just flying machines, but integrated sensor and weapons platforms. The arms race became less about building the strongest weapon and more about fielding the smartest one. This philosophy extended beyond fighter jets, influencing the development of guided missiles, smart bombs, and the vast surveillance networks that became the unseen battlegrounds of the Cold War. Looking back, the silent, intricate dance of the A4's gyros inside a cramped cockpit over Korea was one of the most pivotal moments of the 20th century. It was an early, definitive sign that future wars would be won not by the side with the most steel, but by the side that could process information faster and more accurately. The invisible technologies, the ones measured in microns and microseconds, were beginning to decide the outcomes of very real, very violent battles. The lesson was clear. In modern warfare, the sharpest mind often beats the strongest arm. It forces us to reconsider the very nature of power, to ask ourselves a question that remains just as relevant today as it was in the deadly skies of MiG Alley. In any conflict, what is it that truly wins a war? The story of the showdown between the MiG-15 and the F-86 Sabre in the skies over MiG Alley is more than just a chapter in military history. It is a profound reminder that the most decisive battles are not always won by visible strength. For months, talented pilots fought and died for a mystery they could not explain, a ghost bullet that seemed to bend the laws of physics. They faced not only an enemy but the very limits of their own understanding. The truth, when it was revealed, lay not in a miraculous alloy or a new explosive. It was hidden in the silent operation of gyroscopes, in the micrometer-level precision of gears, and in the cold logic of a mechanical brain. The A4 analog computer was a testament to the idea that a concept, a smarter approach to an old problem, could be more decisive than any more powerful engine or larger cannon. It changed the war not by making a louder bang, but by whispering the right answer into the pilot's ear at precisely the right moment. The journey from aerial panic to laboratory discovery in Moscow shows us that the future is often shaped by the things we cannot immediately see. It is a story of human ingenuity and of the subtle difference between copying a design and truly understanding the spirit that created it. In the end, the secret of the Sabre was not just a technology but a philosophy that in the modern age, information is the ultimate weapon. Thank you for spending part of your day with us.